Welcome, listeners, to another interesting episode of the Paws Effect podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Carra, a veterinarian with a passion for understanding the intricate world of pets. Today, we embark on a fascinating journey to uncover the heart of the pet landscape in South Africa. We're not just scratching the surface, we're delving deep into the lives of pet owners, their insights, their tensions, and their unmet needs. To guide us through this exploration, I'm joined by remarkable guest, Victoria Laval. She's an expert in the pet industry research and has been instrumental in conducting a groundbreaking pet landscape study together with Beyond Insights. Victoria, welcome to the podcast. So the current subject matter is your pet landscape survey that you conducted. It is so exciting. I've been dying to talk to you because there is so many fascinating subject matters that we can delve into, and hopefully we will do so. Can you tell us how that came about?
So I joined RCL about a year and a half ago, well, almost a year and a half, and I work across all the different categories, but obviously my passion is pets. I have two little fur babies at home. I have two cats, Dexy and Stormy, and so I really have a strong connection to the pet category. And coming into the business, there's a lot of information out there, not necessarily the right, but there's also a lot of black hole around pets, pet nutrition, how many people in South Africa, for example, have a pet. And I got the privilege, and what every consumer loves, every researcher loves, is to actually be able to do a pet landscape study and do one from scratch. It's never been done before in the company. So that was really, really great. So I got to kick this off, and a lot of information came. We actually threw the whole kitchen sink at it. There was a lot that we wanted to know, a lot we wanted to prove, and we kicked it off. So
So how do you start that kind of study? So obviously with an objective in mind, or just is it based on sort of the information that's not currently available?
So the objective in mind was we wanted this kind of to be a holistic study, and even though I look after certain brands, and we wanted to be sort of brand agnostic and really understand from the consumer point of view. I think when we do a lot of our work and a lot of our marketing and understanding, it's often from a retailer or a manufacturer point of view or brand point of view, and sometimes we forget the consumer, who's the most, obviously in my role, it's the most important thing. So we wanted to understand how they saw the different shopping channels, how they understood the different brands, actually who was our pet consumer. I couldn't tell you that coming in and being here for the first few months. I couldn't tell you who a pet consumer was. I couldn't tell you how many people in South Africa owned a pet, what types of pets they have, which I found quite fascinating. I thought something, for example, like hamster ownership would be quite high, but it is quite low in our study. So, and obviously dog ownership is the highest ownership, and then followed by cats. So it was kind of getting those insights. I was a bit nervous that people, when we said if you own a fish, that people would say like, yes, I own 1,000 fish or 100 fish, but luckily they didn't do that, and they just said, no, we own fish, okay. And didn't actually put a number behind it. But yeah, that's how it sort of all came about. And
that's great. And in terms of the study, is this a qualitative, quantitative study? Can you explain to the listeners the difference between those two?
It is both. So we actually did two phases. We started off with a qualitative phase, and this is actually to get really in-depth information. You don't speak to a large amount of people, you speak to an individual, and you get a lot of information from them. We also did that in two phases. So we did focus groups. So this is basically people sit around in a group and talk about their pet ownerships. And what we really wanted to know about focus groups was sort of what is it like being a pet owner? What are your needs? What are your tension points? What are your concerns about pet ownership? And really dig deep into those kind of consumers. So we spoke to about 56, which is actually quite a high number for qualitative research. A range of people. They either had to have a cat or a dog or both. They the role that the pet played in their life could have been anything, and we really want to understand sort of the insights and the human truths and the tension points that came out of this. We then went into immersions. So we had a videographer that came with us, and they filmed people in their homes to really understand now the day in the life of a pet. So we got all that information, and once we had that, we went into a quantitative phase, and this is sort of being able to generalize and actually put a number beside our qualitative findings, and it also fed into what we found in the qual fed into the quant. So we knew what to ask consumers, the language to use, so we actually got good responses. Because you could go and ask a question and use the terminology we would use at the office, and consumers will have no idea what you're talking about. Like we would say, like, do you shop at a co-op store? And they'll be like, I don't know. What is that? Is it a pet store? Is it a supermarket? And we would get wrong answers. So we knew the kind of language to actually ask them. We also did that in 2 phases. So we did the first phase, which is to understand the penetration and what this landscape looked like. So we went to about 1,000 people for this, and we could understand, for example, that pet ownership is in about 48% of urban metro households in South Africa. We could then understand how many people had a cat, how many people had a dog. And once we got that information, then we went into another quantitative phase that was more of a survey, a UNA, and really getting a lot of data and where they're shopping and how they're shopping and why they're shopping and what kind of brands are they using, what kind of nutrition is important for them. So we got a whole lot of knowledge that we actually added to the pot.
And this is ultimately really valuable information.
Yes.
For people out there. I mean, obviously within a brand to be able to market correctly and understand your consumer, but just generally even as a vet or as a pet owner to understand the general landscape now means that we can communicate better, and we certainly...
Yeah. We know what the gaps are, we know what the opportunities are.
Welcome back to Just for Pets. You're with Dr. Carra.
Hi, Doc. It's Justin the Jack Rossi here, and boy am I itchy.
Are you on a hypoallergenic diet?
Hyper what now?
Changing to a special diet will really help. And Just for Pets have a massive range. And flea and tick medication, special shampoo.
Ooh, how quick can you get some?
Order today and we'll deliver pronto.
I feel better already.
Justforpets.co.za. Vet approved, pet adored. Get it all to your door.
Let's get back to our conversation on the Paws Effect podcast.
One of the key insights that came out was the knowledge gap. So I think as a vet yourself, there's a lot of ways you can communicate to consumers to help them fill that knowledge gap. Consumers want to have knowledge about pet. They want to have knowledge about nutrition, but they don't know where necessarily to source this knowledge from.
Reliable source too.
Yeah, reliable source.
Yeah.
I mean, often the first source that they will go to is either word of mouth, so a friend telling them, like, this is what they feed their cat, this is what they feed the dog, so it's great, they've heard it, it's good for them, or they Google it. Mm-hmm. So you're not necessarily getting the right sources when you Google, or you're finding something to fit your narrative.
Absolutely. So do you mind taking us through some of the data?
Sure.
That'd be great.
So I think that the first thing that we wanted to understand, and I did say that how many people in South Africa, we didn't go to the rural community, it is a bit harder to reach. So ours is mostly urban metro sample. We looked from our Kasi consumer, our township consumer, all the way up to our affluent consumer. And we found that about half of South Africans actually own a pet.
50%.
Yes, well,
Wow.
it's just under, it's like about 48, but to be technical. But yes,
Wow.
about 50% of those people own a pet.
And is that what you anticipated? Is this
Yes,
is it a surprise?
It wasn't a surprise. I think I made dummy data when I was showing everyone what we're going to do, and this was very similar to what I thought ownership would be.
Okay.
It does differ depending on if you're living in a township or if you're middle income or if you are an affluent consumer. So affluent consumers is much higher. It's around 70% of affluent consumers will own a pet. Middle class, it's probably more around the 50, just above 50, and then our Kasi consumer is probably more around 30%.
Okay.
So, I mean, and you can understand that, and then averaging it out, it gets to about 48%. Dog ownership was the highest at about 85%. That did surprise me. I'm a cat lover, so I always think cats going to be also quite high, and everyone loves cats, but they were only around 30% of consumers had a pet. An interesting finding that we did see was people who have there's about 20% of people who have both a cat and a dog in their household. And then only 8% of people had fish.
Okay.
So
One fish.
one fish. And then 7% of people had birds, and then we had 4 had rabbits, and then the smaller ones like reptiles, spiders, all that came at probably about 1% of our population. And we did also see that the average consumer or pet owner had 2 pets in their household.
Okay.
if you're looking what we do, we say it's 2.1, but then it sounds weird because then you think like, is it 2 pets in like an arm or a leg or a paw? Or what is that? But so it's about two pets per household. Another interesting finding that we did find was, I mean, obviously Gauteng being the largely dense area does have the highest pet ownership, but Western Cape does skew high on pets as well, and they do skew high on cats. So that was a learning for me. I
wouldn't have anticipated
that they would skew much higher on cat ownership. We did see some differences. So you do see in working, most people who own a pet will be employed. I always assumed there was that lady at home who's retired and has 1,000 cats. But I mean, if you're unemployed, you're less likely to be owning a pet. Or if you're retired, it's quite a small amount of people and they are less likely to have a pet. But if you're married or single divorce, it's the same if you're going to have a pet or not. But the other interesting finding was if you have children at home, you're more likely to have a pet. So that I thought that was quite interesting. I would assume that people that didn't have children at home would be more likely, but that was not the case in this finding. We also did see a lot of different skews within race. A lot of cultural beliefs do play an impact on that. So if you have a cat ownership, is probably more higher with white consumers because in black cultures it could be seen as evil or witchcraft or that kind of thing. So they're less likely to have a cat. And another interesting finding that I did find was on breeds. So if you have a dog, you're more likely to have a breed than if you have a cat.
Okay.
So if you have a cat, it's more likely to be a domestic short hair or long hair cat. If you have a dog, our custody consumer is more likely to have, and I can never say this word, an Africanus.
Africanus, yes.
Africanus dog. And then we do see them in schools. The middle income are more likely to have a pit bull in when they're having a breed of dog, and then more affluent is more like the Alsatians, the bulldog, the Yorkshire Terrier, come up more in the affluent households.
Okay.
But I did think that was, I mean, you would assume, I think a lot of the dog ownership is for still protection and security as one of the main roles. So, and a lot of breeds do kind of filter into that.
And fulfill both security and family pets.
And what I really loved is one of the groups, one of the guys that we spoke to had a pit bull at home. Even though he initially got it for safety and security at home, this was his baby and he called it Tootsie the whole time. And he actually bathed with the dog and stuff. So it was really part of his family. And then it was another thing that I really loved about the study. It showed that a pet has numerous roles in a consumer's life. And I think if we looked a few years before COVID, we probably would have seen it was more specific in a role. So maybe more for safety and security, more for, you had a specific role. But now we see a lot of roles overlapping and people might have adopted a dog, for example, to be that safety and security in their home. But this dog has now formed this emotional bond with them, and it's, now it's their companion, it's their therapist. They talk to it. I talk to my cats, and they do talk back.
Of course they do.
I understand completely what they're telling me. So that's what, and I really love this quote that someone said to me the other day. They say, pets are the new kids and plants are the new pets.
Oh, wow.
And that's definitely what describes like the role I think pets are starting to have in consumers' homes. And people just really have that emotional attachment that I think has grown over the years, and it's seen more than we would have seen if we did the study a few years ago, which I also really love. And they expressed it a lot, especially when we spoke to them, and you could see it in the passion that they spoke, and that they didn't say my dog, my cat, they would call it by their name. And then that led me on to concerns, what people have concerns for their pets. So they would say, for example, I would expect people to say, I'm concerned for my pet because it's going to cost me money, they're going to ruin my home. And what came out was a little different. Those were still concerns, like, it's expensive healthcare.
I don't have time
I don't
to
have
look
time,
after them.
or they're very demanding and needing, and I have to be at home the whole time and give them that, or they start crying. But a lot of the stuff came out, I'm really scared my animal's going to get sick.
Oh, wow.
I'm really scared that they're going to run away, someone's going to hurt them. So it was really about their animal.
And the fear of loss.
And the fear of loss rather than themselves. And I don't know if that is linked to COVID and the fear of loss that we had during that time. But there is that fear of loss. And I know my fears for my little kitties is that they would get stolen or hurt or injured, or it's not the cost that I have to pay, but it's that kind of sadness that goes with it, or the fear, or this, like I don't even want to think about that.
No.
But yeah, so I mean, those were quite interesting insights that we got from it. We spoke a lot about trends with our consumers and what they were seeing out there. There was a few things that they were talking about, like they would talk about there would be, food, nutrition. So a lot of, if they go into Woolworths, they'll see like the Posh Pets mints for cats and dogs. Some of them would tell us their story about actually buying it for themselves and then realizing it was for a pet. So a lot of like human type food out there. They spoke about, accessorizing their animals, getting medical aid for them. And doing, there's now restaurants you can take your animals to, there's menus. So, and what the theme came out about this was a huge theme around humanization. So, and humanization, I think, was quite core to most of our consumers, and I think we are seeing that growing. It's probably not the same as if you go to like America and see it in their country and stuff, but in South Africa, it is one of the trends that we are seeing is growing quite big in the pet landscape.
And there are obviously concerns around that in some respects, because we're worried that if there's a gap in knowledge on nutrition, that potentially we might see some shortfalls with people not understanding then how to adequately feed their pets. But we're going to delve into that a little bit later.
And I'm glad you brought up that gap, because that was another thing that came through. There was quite a big gap in knowledge, even with consumers who felt like they really understood pet care and pet nutrition. There was that huge gap that did exist.
Okay.
So when we dug deeper, we were asking them, can you read the back of a pack? And I know, and I've been in FMCG for years, I don't know how to read the back of a pack. So I'm thinking, if I'm a typical consumer, there must be many of me out there. And even the ones that said they could read the back of the pack really couldn't read or understand that nutritional thing came out. So then it comes to the opportunities of how do we make that easier for them to understand what's good or bad for the pets. And ways about it. A lot of them we talked about it, look for different sources of information that tells them. So, how do we make, the vet recommendation or the vet's voice more heard in that space? Because that is one of the elements that they do find is quite important to them. They just are afraid of the expense that might come with it. We also found stuff like when we spoke about protein, for example, they want food that's high in protein. They don't know what high in protein is. So is 20% high in protein? Is 10%? Is 100%? I don't know. If you're telling me the percentage of protein on pack, I don't know really what that means unless you're telling me it's high in protein. And then the benefits of the protein. So we did find a lot of knowledge gaps, and people also saying they don't know where to necessarily find the information. And even people who said that they were experts, so in the qualitative groups, people would be like, I know the best nutrition for my cats, and then we feed it milk every day, and then they would do all these things that someone else, if they've spoken to a vet, knows that your cat shouldn't be drinking milk, for example. So it's kind of those kind of learnings that we need to bring back to the pet owner.
Educational opportunities.
Educational opportunities, and find platforms which they can access. I mean, a lot of platforms that they are using, for example, now is YouTube, is TikTok. They're looking at pet trends on TikTok and that kind of stuff. So,
and talk about the sources of information. I mean, do they belong to communities? Do they belong to sort of Facebook groups? How are they actually interacting with information? And now, a word from our amazing sponsors who make the Paws Effect podcast possible. To make a promise implies trust. To make a pledge creates expectation. And to make a commitment initiates responsibility. For more than 25 years, we have made it our mission to take the ifs, buts, and maybes out of premium pet food. That's why our experts put the best science behind our food, so your pet's health is put first. That's why when you seek value, we strive to give you more, like protecting your pets with our free accident benefits. And when you need great tasting food, our fresh meat taste delivers. You see, what sets us apart is not one thing, it's all these things combined. Because we understand that when it comes to your pet's health, you don't want doubt and uncertainty, you want absolutes. the absolute best given your means, like premium veterinary quality food of real value that doesn't cost an arm and a paw. So rest assured that any claim we make, we stand by. It's our commitment to your pets and our promise to you. In fact, we're so confident in what we stand for that we have made the ultimate promise to you. It's called the UltraPet Promise, 100% money-back guarantee, a no ifs, no buts, and no maybes kind of promise. We call it our satisfaction guarantee. Let's get back to our conversation on the Paws Effect podcast.
We did ask about it. The main source of information was Google, and that was about 40% of consumers says this is where I go for my main source of information. Then a lot of people are going to pet rescue things like SPCA to ask for advice on what to feed their cat or dog, how to take care of them, and that kind of information. Pet community days also became quite important in the townships and in the communities to get knowledge, to vaccinate, to know what nutrition to feed their pets. And then pet brand websites were the least, probably least important on it. But when we actually were asking about communities, most people didn't belong to a pet community. And if they did, it was on a WhatsApp group, or they went to a park that allowed dogs and they formed like their own communities within that.
Okay.
But they were very open to pet communities. They just want to know how do I access that pet community? How do I know if I'm not belonging to a Facebook group that I've somehow joined, how do I belong to the right pet communities and access that information? So there was that gap, and there was a low amount of people who were on them, but they very open to belonging to these communities.
I think that's probably why we've seen Pets24 take off. You know, that's been such a great source of information for people, and also very sort of brand agnostic in its approach, and just being informative and providing a source of, you know, where do I take my dog, you know, what park, what restaurant offers that service, you know, where can I take my dog if I'm visiting another area, what hotel can I stay in that allows you to to
exactly.
travel with your pets. So.
And they look for a trusted source. They don't want someone who's pushing a certain brand. They want someone who's authentic and who's a trusted source, and they can give the right information. And they know if they're looking for a breeded animal, if they're looking for a breed cat or a breed dog, that they know they're going to get legit breeders onto it. So there's a lot of things that they want to pull on and extract information from. Yeah, for example, to know where they can take it, to know the pet hotels that are pet friendly. Maybe when you're going away, you want a pet sitter. So we did ask them about what you're buying for your cats and dogs, if you're buying anything at all. And one thing that came about higher for cats was the need for a pet sitter.
For a cat?
For a cat. So I think a dog's a little bit easier. You can take it to a kennel, but cats are a little bit more picky. Like my cats, I can never take to, you know, like a cattery. I need someone to come in and actually look after them, and then finding that person who's reliable and will look after my pet and give the pet needs that their requirements that they need. Everyone always says to me if when they die they want to come back as my cat. So it's a little bit, my cats are a little bit spoiled, but so I think that I did find that quite nice to, you know, see that comes out quite strongly for our cats, because cats accessories and stuff aren't as great as dogs.
No, well, they don't tolerate them maybe as well. So let's talk about the trend from having a security dog to having a pet, for example, that sleeps in your bed. What were you finding? So what sort of percentage of people were having a family pet versus considering their pet their child?
So that was quite interesting. In the qualitative groups, we actually found a lot of people were talking about their pets. Their pets were like one of their children. But we did start seeing a nuance come in. So when we went into quantitative, we tried to unpack that nuance a little bit more. And what we did find is that a large amount of people actually sitting in that my pet is part of the family. And a lot more than I would have thought. Whereas less people, I think it was only like maybe 20% were thinking about it. Is there you know, like a functional type of role only? But there was a large amount, but it actually split into two. There were people that this is my child. I treat it just like I would treat my child. They get the same privileges as my child. And then there was those people who are like, this is a family pet. I love it. It's part of the family, but it's not necessarily my child's. Like, my child's will get a little bit more benefits, or slightly a little bit more. But and it's weird because when you start talking about these different types of typologies that came out, people can associate to it. They'll be like, oh yes, I'm definitely that person who it's my child, or I'm definitely that person who it's part of the family.
So
or
they're
I'm
falling
like,
into
yeah.
categories.
Yeah,
they're not like sometimes they are and sometimes they're...
I think when it comes to pet, you know,
Okay.
like this is definitely where I fall. And what was quite interesting too was another one that came out was this emerging, you know, relationship with it. So it's like a pet that's come into someone's life quite recently over the last few years, and they're really developing the strong emotional bond with them. I mean, we spoke to one consumer and he had a cat in the township that came into his home, and he just wanted this cat to love him. He was like, this cat will love me. He's like, the cat will scratch him every day and try and get away, but he was like, this cat is going to love me. By the end of it, we're gonna have a strong relationship. And it's quite nice to see this kind of bond coming with from all walks of life, from all our pet owners, even people who were initially scared or had that stigma around cats, wanting to bring their cats and their cats to like love them and showing a lot of love to their cats. So, yeah.
And so why do you think that's happened? Why do you think there's been an emerging sort of trend in
there's definitely a need, and we've seen it across categories, a need for social connection. So I think when COVID came, it took away that social connection that we had with people, and a lot of people put it onto their pets or adopted pets during that time. So they've put that need onto it, and now this connection is there, and it becomes such a good part of your family that it's really hard to now dissociate it when you're back into society and you're seeing people and you're engaging again. You know, that connection is formed. A lot of people even talk about like, I can't wait to go home to like see my pets. Or I mean, I've been at braais and stuff when people leave early because they need to go and feed their animal or feed and then come back. Yeah. I'm no longer the priority. So I think that connection is informing, and I don't think we would have seen this 5 years ago. I think there would have been more distinct roles in the house, more distinct, you know, like I'm definitely just someone who my dog is there, they sleep outside, they're for security. They're a pit bull. Like I don't see that, we're seeing a lot of that changing.
And talk to me about one of the things I found very interesting was the cultural changes. So, you know, you mentioned before about cats being viewed as evil, or what was some of the talking points were around the neighbors still feeling that way, and obviously was it the guy who was very infatuated with his cat was
he was actually
slightly horrified.
There was two cultural things that came out. A lot of people weren't really brought up with like, you know, having cats or dogs in the home. So if they had a dog, it would be outside dog, and a lot of that is shifting. A lot of people spoke about dogs and the stigma around specifically dogs like pit bulls, how they're seen as aggressive dog, how they're seen as, if you're an owner who owns a pit bull, you could be aggressive yourself, that they're going to bite you, that they're going to attack you. And there was a lot of this people need to understand that is not necessarily the case. They're loving, and that's why the guy kept saying like, you know, my daughter will bath with the pit bull. Like, my pit bull's the biggest baby. Like we'll cuddle and snuggle with it at night. And then likewise on the cat side, we got the same thing. So they were saying, you know, in our culture, in a black culture, cats are seen as evil, especially black cats. And they did speak about this, but they said things are changing. And, you know, when a cat comes into your home, sometimes you can't get rid of it. And they're also starting to change their beliefs. They were just saying sometimes people don't want to come to my house because I have a cat and they want the cat to stay away. And so, but I think a lot of it is changing, and slowly people are seeing...
It's more acceptance.
Yeah, more acceptance of it, or more acceptance of cat people.
Well, cat people are very happy to tell you about how special their relationship is.
Exactly.
Very interesting. And any other insights that you found interesting yourself that you could relate to?
We did see a big trend around nutrition, a big trend around... people mixing human food, and I think that's linking to the humanization element. So when we were actually trying to talk about understanding how many people were buying, you know, pet human-like food. So we were trying to understand that, but people kept saying like, no, I will buy chicken and I'll cook it up for my pet. So that there was a lot of that happening. I think what was quite a big surprise for a lot of people was the blurring of channels. So, like a few years ago, you probably only went to a specific channel to buy your pet food. So you probably only went to, for example, the supermarket and bought, or you only went to a vet and bought, or you only went to the pet store and bought. But now, because of costs, people, budgets, hard times, people are interchanging. So they're not just buying one brand, or they're open to going and switching to another brand if it needs be, if their pet needs change, if their financial situation changes. Or even during the month, they might go and buy an expensive brand like Hills from a pet store, but then, they run out and then they'll go and top up with, Catmore or something from the pet store. And they see it as, they might see a quality difference in the fact of a brand name, but they're seeing the pet loves both the types of food, and they are changing that and interchanging between foods. And that was quite a surprise, an aha moment for me, because, as a pet owner, I've only ever bought one type of food, and that's what I always buy. And how many people are open to this change and how they are shifting for their circumstances, and especially with cats, because cats are very picky. So they're like, if my cat doesn't like it, I will try something else. And to me, sometimes it doesn't even matter the brand name. It's what my cat likes and will eat. So that was one of the...
That's fascinating. And what did they feel about brand names? What was the general feeling? Was there any status associated with what they were buying, or...?
There was a little bit of badging value. So some people would say, like, I do want to buy certain brands. Like, I want to buy Hills, I want to buy Royal Canin, because I have that kind of badging value, and people can see, I can have that packet in my house, and people can see what I'm feeding my pets. So there was a little bit of that kind of element, and like, those are the brands that you want to be seeing. It's what they've been told. But they still, sometimes they have to buy what they need to buy. And even some of the other brands that they are buying, there is a little bit of badging value to that. So even if I have to be forced to buy supermarket brands, there are the top brands in the supermarket that I want to be in my home. So we were sitting in focus groups, and people were speaking a lot about Dogmore. And they were speaking about Dogmore over and over again. And then someone actually mentioned that Dogmore is the category generic for dog food. And that was like, so then I was like, were they actually speaking about Dogmore? Now we have to go back and reevaluate everything that they were saying, because maybe they were speaking about another brand of food and actually it wasn't Dogmore. So that was also like one of those moments when you're just like, oh, like, who would have known there's category generic names in pet food?
Absolutely. So having done this, I mean, you're obviously going to do some future studies. What are the learnings you've taken from this? What are you hoping to adapt and discover for your future surveys?
So I mean, there's quite a lot of learnings that we can do for our brands that we play in. So we play in a lot of different brands in a lot of different tiers. So we am I allowed to say my brands?
Yes.
Okay, so some of the brands that we work with are like UltraPet, Optimizer, Bobtail, Dogmore, Catmore, and Feline and Canine Cuisine. So then obviously we can now have clearer strategies in where we take these brands forward. We know how consumers see them. We know our opportunities and where we can grow going forward. So it's really given us great insights to know where we can tap into and what are those kind of tension points that our pet owners are facing, and where those gaps are. It also helps us a lot with our innovation pipeline, and it also fills this knowledge gap that we didn't have on the pet landscape. So now we can know if our hypotheses are correct or not, and where we can go forward on it. So that is one aspect that we can take. Obviously, we've done a lot of typology type work around it, so we can use that to help elevate our communication, to help spread the word of, help give knowledge to our pet owners so that they can make the right decisions when they're shopping, be it our brand, another brand, that they know what to buy, what's good nutrition for their pets, where they can actually get sources of information of where the pet can stay when you're away, or places that they can take for advice, or people that they can speak to, or like the vet voice coming through on those platforms. So I think there's a lot of like now know-how that we can take forward.
There's a lot of valuable information there that we can tap into. That's great. This has been fascinating. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'd like to delve into pet humanization. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. And to our listeners, remember to stay tuned for more insightful episodes on the Paws Effect podcast, where we continue to explore the fascinating world of pets and their impact on our lives. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining us on this eye-opening journey into the world of pet ownership in South Africa. As we wrap up, I want to reflect on the essence of this study. It wasn't just about numbers, it was about truly grasping what pet owners hold dear. We aim to construct a knowledge, a foundation that spoke their language, one that resonates with their priorities and their aspirations. This study served as a bridge, connecting us on a deeper level with our pet owners, their needs and insights. I'd like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our guest, Victoria Laval, for shedding light on this invaluable study and sharing her expert knowledge. Join us next time as we continue our exploration here on the Paws Effect podcast. And don't forget to like this if you find it helpful, and subscribe for more. Until then, give your pets a hug from me. We have an exciting announcement to make. We are looking for guest speakers who are passionate about the pet industry and sponsors to support future episodes. Are you an expert in pet training, nutrition, or behavior? Maybe you're a veterinarian with insights to share, a pet store owner with unique experiences, or a pet product inventor. We want to hear from you. The Paws Effect podcast is a platform for industry professionals like you to showcase your knowledge, experiences, and stories. As a guest speaker on our podcast, you'll have the opportunity to share valuable information, engage with our audience, and have your voice heard in the pet community. Whether you want to discuss training techniques, emerging pet care trends, or the importance of mental stimulation for pets, we want to feature you and your expertise. So, if you're passionate about pets and have something to say, we invite you to join us on an upcoming episode of the Paws Effect podcast. But wait, that's not all. The Paws Effect podcast is also seeking sponsors to support our mission of educating and entertaining pet lovers worldwide. By becoming a sponsor, you'll gain exposure to our engaged audience and have your brand associated with the love and care that we have for our four-legged friends. If you own a pet-related business, offer pet products or services, or simply want to align your brand with our pet-loving community, we'd love to partner with you. As a sponsor, your brand will be featured prominently in our episodes and our social media channels. It is a great opportunity to showcase your offerings to a dedicated audience of pet enthusiasts. So whether you're an expert in the pet industry looking to share your knowledge, or a business seeking to reach a pet-loving audience, we want to hear from you. To apply as a guest or to inquire about becoming a sponsor of the Paws Effect podcast, please contact me at drcarra@pawsandeffect.co.za. Get in touch and let's discuss the various opportunities. Thank you for joining us today. We can't wait to welcome our future guest speakers and sponsors to the Paws Effect podcast. Remember, every episode is an opportunity to celebrate our four-legged friends.